Welcome to the Outsee Podcast. I'm your host, Justin McRoberts, and welcome specifically to this new chapter season of the podcast. We haven't done seasons in a long time, so I don't know if you can call it a season. In the grand sense, it is a season, but it is a new chapter and kind of new iteration of this podcast, which has evolved, I think, healthily over the course of many years. If you've been along for the ride from the beginning, thank you. Even if you've been along for the ride for a while, thank you. We have been, I think, wisely navigating how best to, what best to provide, what to provide. Like, what does this podcast do that is unique? What makes it worth doing? We're asking you to invest your time in listening to it. Some of you actually contribute financially to make this thing go. So what makes it worth doing? And this next season, next chapter of the podcast, I think we've landed the plane at least for a while. And that is because we're going to make these episodes almost exclusively about what's going on with you. It's going to be about you. We're making this about you. Every week, off and on, I try to, but for the most part, every week, off and on for the last, I don't know, probably year and a half or so at Instagram, I'll post I'll post an AMA and ask me anything. And normally it's read something like this. It says, ask me anything, art, religion, and leadership. Different times of the year. We'll talk about Lent or we'll talk about Christmas or something along those lines. And then I spend time later that week going through the questions, selecting them. And I found that practice really life-giving, and it's helped me tap into what's happening with you, which is why this podcast is going to turn the corner. When I started the podcast initially, there were conversations happening around me culturally, institutionally, that I needed and wanted guidance for. I was pastoring a church at the time, and the folks around me wanted and needed guidance for some of these conversations. And so it really was about trying to find voices around me, around us, who could inform the things that were happening that we didn't have wisdom for. In other words, it was a little bit like this. We were putting this, like, ask someone something into the world. Like, let's go find someone who can talk to us about the intersection of race and economics in the context of religious practice, and find a voice, or comic books and storytelling, why they matter so much to us, to some of us. So all this next season, this next chapter is rooted in this story from way back in my life. One of my a friend of mine who is also a mentor ran a concert series in Michigan, and Ken Hefner is his name, and he ran a concert series at Calvin College up in Michigan. And Ken would regularly get up in front of audiences, and I saw him do this multiple times. So you get up in front of an audience and say something along these lines. I'm not going to get this exactly correct, and I'm sure over the years I've tinkered with it some, but he basically would say that, you paid a ticket to be here. You invested some time and energy to be here. And because you did, you were expecting and hoping that the band or the artist will have brought their A game, will have brought the best of what they have. And that makes sense. An audience, if you're an audience member, you show up, you're like, I would like this band to bring the best they have tonight. If not the best they've got all year. I want the best they have. And then he would say that as the show promoter, as the organizer, he is expecting and wanting the same from the audience. And that was usually a bit of a, for folks who've been around, they'd heard it before, but for at least first-time concert attendees, it was a bit of a kind of like, dog cocks his head to the side, like, I'm sorry? Because what makes something magical in a concert setting isn't just whether or not the artist or the band is crushing it. It's how well that thing is received. I've thought a lot about that, about his posture and the posture he was inviting people into in those settings. And it really has informed my life and my work since then, and more like at increasing depth. When I publish books, the book I'm choosing to finish and publish, that decision-making process, whichever one I'm doing, because I'm usually working on 3 or 4 projects, but what am I going to put into the world has a lot to do with what am I hearing from the people around me? What does it seem like people need? I'm writing and processing I'm creating because it's in me to do. That part is true. But I'm actually publishing and generating and then selling, shipping, as Seth Godin says, because I'm hoping that by doing so, I'm meeting you where you are. If I wasn't trying to meet you where you are, I would just keep it for myself. Um, so this podcast series is going to change in that way. I want to know what it is that you're looking at and what you're dealing with. And I want to do the best I can to meet you in that. So we're going to take the questions from Instagram, and I'm going to answer a few of them every week here on the podcast. I'll continue to do the thing in Instagram where I'll write back in text, but instead of just responding in longer form with a reel or something like that in this one place, I'm going to put on the podcast for you as well. So that's how this is gonna work from this point on. And I'll give you a 2 from this last week that I really, really clicked with. And then you'll expect more of this in the future. The first one that came in, again, ask me anything, art, religion, or leadership. And this question was, what is your favorite thing about creating art and poetry? I love, by the way, that people are noting that I'm making poems. That's actually kind of a cool thing. My favorite part of my creative process, and this is what I wrote here, is the thrill of discovery. First in me as I make it, and then in those who take it into their lives. When I'm crafting something, this is happening more so with poetic works than it has with stuff in the past, or maybe I'm just getting better as a writer. The words I choose have everything to do with how something feels in me. In other words, I'm learning how I feel or think or see even as I put something on paper. And you've probably experienced something like this, where like you're having an experience or a thought, you're having feelings and thoughts. And when those feelings or thoughts are in us, it can feel a little bit soupy, not entirely clear. It's not always chaos. We're not all like a huge mess internally, but something close to magic happens when I choose a word and pin it on the paper, and my soul says, yes, that one. You've experienced this in the other way, and I experience this all the time when something's going on in me, thoughts, feelings, wonderings, and I pick a word and I put it on the paper, and my soul goes, not that one. What's not happening there is that's not the right word. In other words, I didn't put the wrong word there to articulate this idea. What's happening there is my soul is saying, that's not what I mean. That's not what's in me. That's not that's most wholly reflective of me. I'm discovering myself, learning myself, and seeing myself as I put something on paper, or in the past when I've written songs. When it clicks, it's this thing I put outside of me rhymes with my soul. That's the process of self-discovery. And I love that feeling. It's a deep, wonderful sensation. Is the best of highs. The other part of that is once something is in the world and people start responding to it, I have to let go. Like, I've had my experience with the piece and now you have to have yours. And I actually do care about the people I make work for and produce for. And so when I hear things back, that side of the relationship, I learn things about the world around me. I learn things about my audience, my listeners, my readers. And because I'm actually like sincerely interested in the lives of people around me, I'm fascinated, sometimes grieved, sometimes encouraged. It's a relationship that an artist has with the people who are paying attention. And on the other side of that relationship, I actually really enjoy what happens in you, or what something I make stirs in you, because then I get to see you. I love the process of self-discovery. That's the thing I like most about art and creativity. The other question that was far more specific and institutional was, what is a pastor's job and what is it not? I get a lot of questions. I pastor a church. Some of you know this, some of you don't. I pastored a church I helped to pastor a church for a number of years, almost 20 years. And I've done a lot of work with ministry folks, whether it's Young Life or Youth for Christ or YWAM, or local churches, et cetera, some church networks. So I get a lot of questions, and happily so, about pastoring, pastoral leadership. And this is one of the questions that actually pops up in different forms. This is maybe the most direct way to ask it. look, what are the limits to the role? And over the years, I've had different answers to this question, given my context, and then it kind of struck me. Eugene Peterson, and this is how I wrote it, Eugene Peterson described church this way, because a pastor is someone who is overseeing a church. That's maybe that's second. Maybe we'll come back to that, the definition of a pastor. Eugene Peterson describes a church as a particular people at a particular time in a particular place. In other words, there's some real specificity to that. Like how these people are journeying together has a lot to do with who they are in relationship to one another in the particular place they are geographically, where they're placed in history as well. So in other words, a church in 1974, the year I was born in Concord, California, is going to be different than a church in Concord, California in 2024. Or a church in Oakland, California in 2024 is going to be different than a church in Martinez, California in 2024. Geography, place, people, all that adds up to like, this is different everywhere. Now, the role of the pastor, as I see it, is to help lead those people in the collective direction and movement of the Spirit of Christ together. And what that means is that role and what constitutes that role primarily has to do with paying attention, primarily has to do with listening. And I think we know this more and more as time goes on, because what we often try to do is apply some sort of methodology. Like this is how a pastor does what a pastor does, like from 40,000 feet. And then we just kind of jam it in to some place somewhere in the country with this group of people and hope that this methodology works out. And we find all these little kind of mini cultures of folks who are being rubbed the wrong way by what seems like the wrong person. A pastor is someone who primarily pays attention to the people around them, which means, and this is the way I wrote it in the answer here, I think that means that the answer to the question can never be a universal answer or universally applied. It's an answer gathered in deep listening to God and to the people I'm with and the people I'm serving in the particular place I am during the particular time I get to be there. What I'm trying not to avoid here is like, well, it's up to you, because that's not really what that is. It's not like, well, I don't know, how do you want to pastor? That's not really how you answer that question. Like, what do you want to do? That's part of it, because if you show up in a place as a pastor and there are things that you want to do that the people that you're going to pastor don't want, well, like that's a miss. So what you want does play a part, but the servant orientation of the pastoral role, I would suggest, means that I hope that the things that I want line up really nicely with the needs and the desires of this particular people in this particular place. So what's my job? My job is particularly to pay attention. Here's what my job isn't. And this is a slightly easier answer. What my job is not as a pastor. My job is not to pre-decide where we're going to be in the long run. My job is not to decide on behalf of these people what the voice of God and the activity and the movement of the Spirit of Jesus looks like in that particular place. My job is not to decide for this group of people. I don't think that's what great pastoral leadership looks like. My job is primarily to listen. And once we've come to, and maybe I have come to, a sense of the actual movement of God among this particular people in this particular place at this particular time, then I get to faithfully lead those people in that direction. So this kind of thing is more fun for me. I hope you're enjoying this this episode of the podcast, episode 1 of the new season and new chapter as it was. If you're not following me on Instagram, that is the primary place I'll be grabbing questions, and you could just go to Instagram and just search my name, Justin McRoberts, and I will be there. There should be something that looks like me there. Otherwise, we may look into other ways to gather some questions. We'll see about that. This works for me right now. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the At Seed podcast. Until next time.